The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Buckingham Palace as guard William Thompson adjusted his red tunic and straightened his iconic bearskin hat. At 28 years old, he had been serving as a Queen's Guard for 3 years, and the routine had become second nature. Stand perfectly still, eyes forward, no reactions, no emotions. These were the unbreakable rules that every guard learned from their first day of training. William had always taken pride in his ability to remain motionless for hours, regardless of what happened around him. Tourists would wave frantically, trying to get his attention. Children would make funny faces just inches from his nose. Adults would tell jokes, hoping for even the slightest crack in his stone-like expression. But William never budged. He was a professional, and professionals didn't break character. That particular Tuesday morning seemed like any other. The usual crowd of tourists had already begun gathering outside the palace gates, cameras ready to capture the famous guards, in their magnificent uniforms. Parents held their children on their shoulders for better views, while tour guides explained the history and traditions of these elite soldiers. William had positioned himself at his assigned post near the main entrance, his rifle held at the perfect angle, his posture impeccable. The familiar sounds of the city filled the air, car engines humming in the distance, the chatter of excited visitors, and the occasional honking of a London taxi. Everything was perfectly normal until a small voice broke through the morning. Chaos. "Mummy, why won't the soldier look at me?" The voice belonged to a little girl, no more than 5 years old, with curly blonde hair tied in pigtails and wearing a bright yellow dress that seemed to capture the sunlight. William's training kicked in automatically. Don't look, don't react. Stay focused on the horizon. But something about the child's innocent question tugged at something deep inside him. From the corner of his eye, he could see her standing just a few feet away, her small hand reaching toward him as if she wanted to touch his uniform. The little girl's mother knelt down beside her, daughter speaking in gentle tones. "The guards have a very important job, sweetheart. They protect the Queen and they have to concentrate very hard. They can't talk or move while they're working." But the child wasn't satisfied with this explanation. She took a step closer to William, her bright blue eyes studying his face with the kind of curiosity that only children possess. "But he looks sad," she whispered to her mother, though her voice carried clearly in the morning air. William felt his heart skip a beat. Sad? He had never thought about how his expression might appear to others, especially to children. His training had taught him to maintain a neutral, stoic face, but he wondered now if his professional mask might seem cold or unfriendly to a young child. The mother smiled and gently took her daughter's hand. "Come along, Emma. Let's go see the horses." But Emma planted her feet firmly and shook her head. She wasn't ready to leave the fascinating soldier who stood so perfectly still. "Can I give him a flower?" Emma asked, pointing to a small daisy she had picked from a nearby garden bed. "Maybe that will make him happy." William's chest tightened. The simple, pure kindness of the child's gesture was almost overwhelming. Here was this tiny person, barely tall enough to reach his waist, wanting nothing more than to brighten what she perceived as his sadness. In all his years of service, no one had ever offered him such genuine compassion. The mother looked embarrassed and started to apologize to William, even though she knew he couldn't respond. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. "Emma has always been very sensitive to other people's feelings. She means no harm." Emma continued to stare up at William, the small daisy held tightly in her little fist. Her expression was so earnest, so hopeful, that William found himself fighting an internal battle unlike any he had ever experienced. His training screamed at him to remain motionless, to ignore the child and focus on his duties. But his heart was telling him something entirely different. As the minutes ticked by, more tourists began to notice the touching scene unfolding before the palace. A small crowd gathered, watching as the determined little girl refused to give up on her mission to cheer up the guard. Cameras started clicking, but for once William wasn't thinking about the tourists or their photos. All he could think about was the pure, innocent kindness radiating from the child before him. The moment stretched on, filled with possibility and the kind of magic that only children seem capable of creating. William stood at a crossroads between his rigid training and his human compassion, while Emma waited patiently below, her small offering of friendship held out like a bridge between two very different worlds. The tension in William's chest grew stronger as Emma continued to wait patiently, her small daisy still extended toward him. He could hear whispers from the growing crowd of onlookers, and he knew that whatever decision he made in the next few moments would be witnessed by dozens of people with cameras and phones, ready to capture everything. Just when William thought the situation couldn't become more challenging, Emma did something that completely caught him off guard. Instead of getting frustrated or walking away like most people would, she sat down, cross-legged on the cold stone pavement directly in front of him. She placed the daisy gently on the ground between them and looked up at him with a smile that could have melted the hardest heart. "I'll wait," she announced to her mother in her clear, sweet voice. "The soldier might want the flower later when he's not so busy." The mother's eyes filled with tears at her daughter's pure determination. Other tourists began to murmur appreciatively, clearly moved by the child's persistence and kindness. An elderly gentleman with a walking stick commented to his wife, "In all my years visiting the palace, I've never seen anything quite like this." William felt something crack inside his chest. Not his professional composure, but something deeper. The child's unwavering faith that he was a good person who deserved kindness, despite his cold exterior, was touching a part of his soul he had forgotten existed. For 3 years, he had been treated like a statue, a tourist attraction, something to pose with for photos. But Emma saw him as a human being who might be sad and could use a friend. 20 minutes passed. Emma remained seated on the ground, occasionally adjusting the position of her daisy to make sure it was perfectly placed. She had started humming softly to herself, a simple nursery rhyme that William recognized from his own childhood. The melody drifted up to him, bringing back memories of his little sister singing the same song years ago. The crowd around them had grown larger, but it had also grown quieter. People seemed to sense that they were witnessing something special, something that deserved respect and attention. Children in the crowd began asking their parents why the little girl was sitting on the ground, and parents found themselves explaining the power of patience and kindness. Emma's mother had tried several times to convince her daughter to leave, but Emma politely declined each request. "The soldier needs to know someone cares about him," she explained with the simple wisdom that children often possess. "Everyone needs to know that." William's fellow guard, James, was stationed about 30 feet away and had been watching the entire scene unfold. James had served alongside William for 2 years, and they had developed a deep respect for each other's dedication to duty. But even James found himself moved by what he was witnessing. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, Emma showed no signs of giving up her vigil. She had started talking to William even though she knew he couldn't respond. She told him about her pet goldfish named Sparkles, about how she was learning to ride a bicycle without training wheels, and about her favorite book with pictures of horses. "My daddy says soldiers are very brave," she said, looking up at him with admiration. "He says they protect people like me and my mummy. Thank you for protecting us, Mr. Soldier." Those words hit William like a thunderbolt. In all his training and service, he had never heard such a direct, heartfelt expression of gratitude from someone he was sworn to protect. The abstract concept of serving the crown and country suddenly became very real and personal in the form of this small child who understood in her simple way the sacrifice he made every day. The daisy on the ground had begun to wilt slightly in the warm sun, but Emma carefully picked it up and smoothed its petals, determined to keep her gift as fresh as possible. Her dedication was absolute, her faith unshakable. A news reporter in the crowd had started filming, recognizing that this was exactly the kind of heartwarming story that people needed to hear. But she kept her distance, understanding that getting too close might disturb the delicate magic of the moment. As the clock approached noon, William realized that his shift change was still 2 hours away. Emma had been sitting with him for over an hour, showing no signs of fatigue or boredom. Her mother had given up trying to convince her to leave, and had instead settled onto a nearby bench, watching her daughter with a mixture of pride and amazement. "See, Little girl's unwavering presence was beginning to affect not just William, but everyone around them. Other tourists had started to sit down as well, creating an impromptu gathering of people united by the simple desire to see how this touching story would unfold. William found himself at war with everything he had been taught. His training demanded absolute stillness and silence, but his humanity was crying out to acknowledge this child's extraordinary gift of compassion. The weight of his decision felt enormous, but Emma's patient smile below gave him strength he never knew he possessed. The moment that changed everything came at exactly 12:15 in the afternoon. Emma had been sitting patiently for nearly 2 hours when she suddenly stood up, brushed off her yellow dress, and took a step closer to William. The crowd held its breath, sensing that something significant was about to happen. "Mr. Soldier," Emma said softly, her voice carrying clearly in the hushed atmosphere. "I know you can't talk to me, but I want you to know that you're doing a really good job. My mummy says that sometimes people need to hear that they're doing good, even when they can't say thank you back." William felt his eyes begin to well up with tears. This 5-year-old child had just given him the recognition and appreciation that he had never received in 3 years of service. Her words cut through all his professional armor and reached the man underneath the uniform. Emma carefully picked up the daisy from the ground and took another small step forward. She was now close enough that William could smell the sweet scent of her shampoo and see the small freckles scattered across her nose. With the utmost gentleness, she reached up and placed the daisy against his boot, tucking it carefully into the leather strap so it wouldn't fall. "There," she said with satisfaction. "Now you have a flower to keep you company." That was the moment William's training finally gave way to his heart. Very slowly, almost imperceptibly, he moved his eyes downward to look directly at Emma. Their eyes met for the first time, and the little girl's face lit up with pure joy. "You looked at me," she whispered excitedly, but not so loudly that it would draw unwanted attention to William's break in protocol. Even at 5 years old, she seemed to understand that this was a special moment that needed to be protected. The crowd erupted in gentle applause, but it was respectful and warm rather than loud or disruptive. People had been so moved by what they witnessed that they felt compelled to show their appreciation for both the guard's humanity and the child's persistence. William's fellow guards had all noticed what happened, but rather than reporting the incident, they found themselves smiling. Guard James later said that he had never been more proud to serve alongside someone than he was of William in that moment. Emma's mother approached slowly, tears streaming down her face. She had never been more proud of her daughter's compassion and determination. "Emma, sweetheart," she said gently, "I think it's time we let the soldier get back to his important work." But Emma wasn't quite finished. She reached into her small purse and pulled out a piece of paper that had been folded many times. "I drew this for you this morning," she told William, placing it carefully next to the daisy by his boot. "It's a picture of you protecting the castle." William couldn't see the drawing from his position, but later he would discover that it showed a tall figure in red with a big smile, standing in front of a castle with a rainbow overhead. At the bottom, in Emma's careful 5-year-old handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for keeping us safe." As Emma prepared to leave with her mother, she looked up at William one more time. "Will you be here tomorrow?" she asked hopefully. William, still maintaining his position, but with his eyes now warmly focused on her face, gave the tiniest nod, so small that only Emma could see it. Her smile in response was radiant. The crowd began to disperse as Emma and her mother walked away, but the atmosphere had completely changed. Where before people had been trying to get reactions from the guards for entertainment, now they approached with genuine respect and appreciation. Children waved politely instead of making faces, and adults offered quiet words of thanks. Word of the incident began to spread rapidly through social media. The news reporter who had been filming shared her footage with the caption, "Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness have the biggest impact." Within hours, the video had been viewed thousands of times, with comments pouring in from around the world, praising both Emma's compassion and William's humanity. But the real impact wasn't measured in views or likes. It was measured in the change that rippled through the entire guard unit. That evening, during their debrief, the commanding officer addressed what had happened. Instead of disciplining William, he commended him for showing that the guards were human beings capable of compassion while still maintaining their duty and dignity. Today, the officer said to the assembled guards, we were reminded that our job isn't just to stand at attention and look impressive. We're here to protect and serve the people, and sometimes that means acknowledging their humanity and our own. The story of Emma and William spread far beyond London. Parents began using it as an example to teach their children about kindness and persistence. Military families shared it as proof that soldiers, no matter how tough their exterior, are people with hearts and feelings. William kept Emma's drawing and the dried daisy in his personal effects. Every morning before his shift, he would look at them and remember that his service had real meaning to real people, especially to one little girl in a yellow dress who saw past his uniform to the person underneath. 3 days after the incident with Emma, something remarkable began happening at Buckingham Palace. Children who visited with their families started approaching the guards differently. Instead of trying to make them laugh or break their concentration, kids began leaving small gifts, flowers, drawings, and handwritten notes down at the guards' feet. William found himself looking forward to his shifts in a way he never had before. Each morning brought new surprises. A 7-year-old boy from Scotland left a drawing of a superhero guard. Twin girls from Canada carefully placed matching dandelions by his boots. A shy 10-year-old from Japan bowed respectfully and left an origami crane with a note that read, "For protection and good luck." The other guards began experiencing similar interactions. Guard James received a small wooden toy soldier from a boy who said it was to keep him company during his long shifts. Guard Peterson found a bracelet made of colorful beads with a note explaining that each color represented a different wish for his safety and happiness. The commanding officers initially worried about how to handle this new phenomenon. The guards were receiving dozens of small gifts each day, and there were concerns about security protocols and maintaining proper military bearing. However, after observing how positively the interactions affected both the guards and the public, they decided to allow the practice to continue with some guidelines. A special protocol was established where guards could briefly acknowledge gifts left by children with a small nod or eye contact, as long as it didn't interfere with their primary duties. The gifts would be collected at the end of each shift and properly catalogued, with the guards able to keep items that held special meaning. William's story had spread throughout the military community, inspiring other ceremonial guards at different locations. The guards at Windsor Castle, the Tower of London, and even Edinburgh Castle reported similar experiences with children who had heard about Emma's act of kindness. One particularly moving incident occurred when a group of children from a local school for the deaf visited the palace. They had learned about William and Emma's story and wanted to show their appreciation for the guards' service. Unable to speak to the guards, they instead used sign language to spell out "thank you" repeatedly while leaving colorful handmade cards. Guard Thompson, who had learned some basic sign language during his military training, was able to subtly sign back "you're welcome" to the children when his superiors weren't looking. The children's faces lit up with joy at this unexpected response, and their teacher later wrote a letter to the palace expressing how much the interaction meant to her students. The media attention continued to grow, but it was largely positive and respectful. News outlets from around the world picked up the story, often using it as an example of how small acts of kindness can bridge cultural and social divides. The story was translated into multiple languages and shared in countries where military ceremonies and honor guards played similar roles. 1 month after the original incident, Emma returned to the palace with her mother. She had been asking every day if they could go back to see her soldier, and her mother finally agreed to make the trip. Emma carried with her a new drawing, this one showing multiple guards surrounded by happy children, with the words, "Friends, Forever," written across the top. When Emma spotted William at his familiar post, she ran toward him with excitement, then stopped a respectful distance away and walked slowly forward. The crowd that had gathered recognized her from the news coverage and began to applaud softly. Emma placed her new drawing next to William's boot and looked up at him with the same warm smile that had started it all. "I came back to see if you were still here," she said quietly. My mummy says you might have to work at different places sometimes. William looked down at her and gave another barely perceptible nod, his eyes conveying the warmth and gratitude that his position wouldn't allow him to express verbally. Emma beamed at his acknowledgement. I've been telling all my friends at school about you, she continued. They want to come visit too, if that's okay. But I told them they have to be very respectful and quiet, like you taught me. The idea that William had taught her anything struck him deeply. He realized that their interaction had been educational for both of them. She had learned about respect and duty, while he had learned about compassion and connection. Emma's return visit sparked another wave of media coverage, this time focusing on the lasting impact of the original encounter. Child psychologists were interviewed about the importance of teaching children empathy and respect for public servants. Military experts discussed how the incident had helped humanize an institution that was often seen as distant and unapproachable. But perhaps the most significant impact was on the guards themselves. They had discovered that acknowledging the humanity of the people they served didn't diminish their professionalism, it enhanced it. They took greater pride in their work, knowing that it meant something real and tangible to the families who visited the palace. The palace gift shop began selling postcards featuring a professionally taken photograph of the moment when William first looked down at Emma, with proceeds going to military charities. The image became iconic, representing the perfect balance between duty and compassion that the guards strived to maintain. 6 months after Emma's first visit, the transformation at Buckingham Palace was undeniable. What had started as one little girl's act of kindness had evolved into something much larger and more meaningful. The palace had become not just a tourist attraction, but a place where families came specifically to teach their children about respect, service, and human connection. The guards noticed that the quality of their interactions with the public had improved dramatically. Parents used the story of Emma and William to prepare their children for the visit, explaining the importance of being respectful and appreciative rather than simply seeking entertainment. Children arrived with carefully prepared gifts and heartfelt messages, creating moments of genuine connection despite the formal restrictions of the guards' duties. William had become something of a celebrity within military circles, though he wore his fame reluctantly. He was invited to speak at military academies about the balance between maintaining professional standards and acknowledging one's humanity. His message was always the same. We serve people, not just institutions. Sometimes remembering that makes us better soldiers, not worse ones. The impact extended beyond the immediate area around Buckingham Palace. Schools throughout London began incorporating visits to see the guards into their citizenship education programs. Teachers used the experience to help children understand concepts like duty, respect, and public service in tangible ways. One particularly special visit came from a group of children from Great Ormond Street Hospital. These young patients, many dealing with serious illnesses, had heard about the guards' kindness toward children and requested a special visit. The palace arranged for a private viewing where the children could interact with the guards in a more relaxed setting. William volunteered to be part of this special event. As he knelt down to speak with a 7-year-old boy undergoing cancer treatment, he was reminded of why Emma's initial gesture had been so powerful. These children, facing challenges that most adults couldn't imagine, still had the capacity for wonder, gratitude, and joy. "Are you really as brave as you look?" the little boy asked William during their conversation. "I try to be," William replied honestly. "But sometimes I think children like you are braver than any soldier." The boy smiled and handed William a small pin that read, "Honorary Brave Kid." It was a tiny gesture, but it meant more to William than any military decoration he had ever received. The story continued to evolve in unexpected ways. Emma, now 6 years old and in her first year of primary school, had become something of an ambassador for kindness in her own right. Her teacher invited her to share her story with other classes, and Emma's simple message, "Everyone needs to know that someone cares about them," resonated with children and adults alike. Emma's mother started a small blog documenting their regular visits to see William and the other guards. The blog became a resource for other parents who wanted to teach their children about respect and appreciation for public servants. It featured tips on how to approach guards respectfully, ideas for appropriate gifts, and stories from other families who had been inspired by Emma's example. The international impact of the story was perhaps most evident during the visit of a foreign dignitary's family. The dignitary's 8-year-old daughter had heard about Emma's story in her home country and specifically requested to leave flowers for the guards during their official visit. The moment was captured by international media and became a symbol of how children's natural compassion can transcend cultural and national boundaries. William's personal life had also been enriched by his experience. He had started volunteering at a local youth center, helping to organize activities for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. Many of these kids had never seen a palace or interacted with anyone in uniform, and William's presence helped break down barriers and show them that military service could be about protection and care rather than intimidation. During one of these volunteer sessions, a 10-year-old girl asked William why he had decided to become a guard. As he thought about his answer, he realized that his motivation had evolved significantly since Emma's visit. "I used to think my job was to stand perfectly still and look impressive," he told the group of children gathered around him. "But now, I know that my real job is to show people that there are still people in the world who care enough to dedicate their lives to protecting others." The children nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of his words in the way that children often do, simply and completely. The anniversary of Emma's first visit was approaching, and the palace had decided to create a small memorial garden where children could safely leave flowers and notes for the guards. The garden would feature a plaque with Emma's words, "Everyone needs to know someone cares about them." William had been asked to participate in the dedication ceremony, an honor that both thrilled and humbled him. As he prepared his remarks, he reflected on how much his life had changed because of one small girl's determination to brighten what she perceived as his sadness. The ripple effects continued to spread. Military units around the world began sharing the story during training sessions, using it as an example of how maintaining one's humanity enhanced rather than compromised professional effectiveness. Veterans organizations adopted Emma's message as part of their outreach efforts, helping to bridge the gap between military and civilian communities. 1 year after that first magical encounter, the memorial garden was officially opened in a ceremony that brought together children from across London and beyond. Emma, now 7 years old and missing her 2 front teeth, stood beside William as they unveiled the plaque together. Her yellow dress had been replaced by a smart blue coat, but her smile was exactly the same, radiant and full of genuine warmth. "I never thought one little flower would cause so much fuss," Emma said during her brief speech to the gathered crowd. Her words slightly whistled through the gap in her teeth. The audience laughed warmly, charmed by her innocence and honesty. William spoke next, his voice steady but emotional. "A year ago, a little girl taught me that being professional doesn't mean being cold, and that showing compassion doesn't make you weak. She reminded me that we serve people, not just duty, and that sometimes the most important thing a person in uniform can do is simply acknowledge that they see you, they appreciate you, and they care." The ceremony was attended by hundreds of people, including many of the children who had been inspired by Emma's example to leave their own gifts for the guards throughout the year. The memorial garden was filled with flowers, drawings, and notes from children around the world who had heard the story and wanted to contribute to this growing symbol of kindness and connection. But perhaps the most moving moment came when a group of military children, sons and daughters of serving soldiers, presented the guards with a special banner they had created. The banner featured handprints from children of military families from different countries, along with the message, "Thank you for protecting our families while our parents protect others." This gesture highlighted one of the most profound impacts of Emma's story. It had helped people understand that the guards themselves were part of families with children of their own who made sacrifices so their parents could serve their country. The guards weren't just ceremonial figures or tourist attractions. They were real people with real lives and real emotions. William's own family had been deeply affected by his newfound fame. His younger sister, the same one whose nursery rhyme, singing he had remembered during that first encounter with Emma, had started volunteering with military family support groups. She often told people that watching her brother's transformation had inspired her to find ways to bridge the gap between military and civilian communities. The story had also sparked academic interest. Researchers at several universities began studying the phenomenon, examining how positive interactions between children and authority figures could improve public perception of institutions like the military and police. The Emma effect, as some researchers called it, became a case study in the power of authentic human connection to transform both individuals and organizations. International media continued to follow the story's evolution. When Emma turned 8, news outlets around the world ran follow-up features about how she was growing up and whether her compassionate nature had endured. Viewers were delighted to learn that Emma had started a kindness club at her school, where children planned small acts of kindness for people in their community. William, now promoted to sergeant, had been given additional responsibilities that included helping to train new guards. His training sessions included a segment about community connection, where he shared his experience with Emma and taught new guards how to maintain their professional standards while still acknowledging the humanity of the people they encountered. Remember, he would tell new recruits, "We're not statues. We're soldiers, and soldiers protect people. Sometimes protecting people means standing perfectly still and silent, but sometimes it means letting a child know that their kindness matters." The memorial garden became a pilgrimage site for families from around the world. Tour guides began including it as a regular stop, using Emma's story to explain the deeper purpose behind the guard's seemingly rigid ceremony. Children would leave flowers and notes, and parents would use the visit as an opportunity to discuss values like respect, service, and compassion. Emma continued to visit regularly, though less frequently as she grew older and her interests expanded. She had taken up piano lessons and joined her school's drama club, but she never forgot her special connection to the guards. On each visit, she would spend a few moments at the memorial garden, reading some of the notes left by other children. During one such visit, when Emma was 9 years old, she noticed a little boy who looked very much like she had 3 years earlier, standing close to a guard, trying desperately to get his attention. Emma approached the boy's mother and quietly shared her story, offering advice on how the child might connect with the guard in a respectful way. "The important thing," Emma explained with the wisdom of her 9 years, "is to remember that the soldier is a real person doing a really important job. If you show him respect and kindness, he'll find a way to show you that he appreciates it." Watching this interaction, William realized that Emma's impact would extend far beyond their original encounter. She was becoming a teacher herself, passing on the lessons she had learned to a new generation of children. The cycle of kindness and understanding would continue, with each child who heard the story carrying it forward in their own way. As the sun set on another day at Buckingham Palace, William stood at his post with a quiet sense of satisfaction. The memorial garden was filled with fresh flowers left by the day's young visitors. In his pocket, he still carried the original daisy that Emma had given him, now dried and pressed between the pages of a small notebook where he recorded the meaningful moments from his service. The transformation that had begun with one little girl's simple act of kindness had rippled outward in ways none of them could have imagined. It had changed not just William's perspective on his job, but the way an entire institution related to the people it served. Most importantly, it had shown the world that even the smallest acts of compassion, when offered with genuine love and respect, have the power to transform hearts, minds, and communities in ways that last far beyond the moment they occur.